All right, good evening, folks. Back in for our 21st lesson. So we're going to turn in our Bibles to Revelation chapter number 6. We're in the sixth seals right now. We did some intro work last week into the seals through chapter 5 and then early chapter 6. Let's go back to chapter 6, pick it up. Let's go to verse 1. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, so this is the first seal, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, and one of the four beasts saying, "Come and see." And I saw, and behold, the white horse, he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, went forth conquering and conquered. Now last week we got in that first seal. We talked about it. Antichrist begins his conquest. I've been studying on this, and of course this is my 7th time through this. It amazes me how many theologians out there, and some guys that I have a lot of respect for, they think this is Jesus. And do you know why? Because he's on a white horse. Well, but the real issue is here in these seals, the first of the 7 judgments, is that Christ is coming as a false Messiah. So that's the way he's presenting himself. And the white horse there gives credence to that here he comes, and so this is not Christ. He's going to come later on a white horse at the end of the tribulation period here, but this is not Jesus. I was amazed how many well-known theologians said, I believe this is Jesus because of the white horse. And I thought, well, then you need to read below the white horse because it doesn't fit the symbology into that. So I want you to notice here that Antichrist comes and he begins his conquest, and he begins it with a message of peace. It's a bow with no arrows. So he's got the military machinery, but he's not trying to use it, but it'll end with war. So when we think about this false Messiah, people will think that they finally found the solution to the problems of the world because they have this leader that they think is good. He's coming in with a message of peace, even though he has the power to do otherwise. But at the same time, he then begins to lead into war. So now let's go, and it says he went forth conquering and to conquer. Until we see his purpose, he came to conquer. That's exactly what he wants to do. Verse number 3. And when he'd opened the second seal, and that's where we pick it up where we left off, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat to take peace from the earth. Now remember, the first one come in with a message of peace, and now the second seal is open. Remember, each of these are judgments. So as a scroll is rolled up, I've got something I'm trying to remember to bring it. I don't have it, but I can bring one like it. But I made a scroll a long time ago, last time I did this, and it had seven seals on it. And so, you would open up one, it'd open up another page, another seal. So I want you to notice here in this second seal, this rider comes in and he went out on a red horse. Power was given to him that sat up thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. Now notice this. This leader is going to turn people against other people. Well, folks, I'll ask you something. What do we see going on in our world right now? That very same issue. When I think about this, it amazes me that people are so suspect to these things and they just don't see. And this second beast here announces judgment that is coming here, and through this second beast. The rider is sitting on a red horse. Now, the red horse here speaks of violence and war. It speaks of a hot war. That's what the red is all about. So after a false peace, what's going to happen? The world is going to be plunged into a third world war, or possibly fourth, depending on Ezekiel 38. So there's going to be the greatest unrest ever. And as we see this, notice what he says here. And he says, he went out and he says, him that sat on take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. So this is a great upheaval. And so we're seeing here in the first seal, there was a spirit of deception. A white horse with a false hood as a rider. Now we're seeing a spirit of war. So think about each of these spirits. I am a firm believer that there are spiritual beings, demonic beings, as we saw in the Old Testament, where it talked about how that the captain of Persia withheld Gabriel getting to help the prophet. And so he said the captain of Persia, what he's talking about? He's talking about the captain of the demonic beings that were overseeing Persia. What is Persia? It's Iran. So we know that Iran's been dark for a long time. So in the second seal, we see this rider, and it speaks of violence and war, hot war. So the Antichrist's initial peace is very temporary, okay? So power was given to him that he could take that peace now, and he would take it, and when he does, he's going to reveal who he really is. You know, people sooner or later will reveal their colors if you're around them long enough. And I've seen that happen with preachers. Preachers come along, they sound good, they look good, they're going through the right mannerisms. And then you sit under them long enough, and all of a sudden they start going into some areas of false doctrine. They start going into areas that's contrary to the Word of God. They start going into areas that's more of appeasement rather than trying to use the Word of God to lead people to Christ, all those things. So peace now is removed quickly. And really what he's doing here is revealing who he is. Now, who's the rider of this horse? Well, in my opinion, it's the same rider, the rider of the white horse. Because he was given this opportunity to come in with a false peace and sway the people to come behind him. They come behind him, and then right after that, what does he do? Satan changes his tactic. This is Antichrist. Remember, there's two people in the Word of God where we find that Satan actually possesses them. One is Judas. Satan came into Judas. And the other one is the son of perdition. Who is that? That's the Antichrist. Satan possesses Antichrist. So, I used to hear that adage back in the 70s and stuff, the devil made me do it. I don't like that adage because you're saying that you're so important that Satan himself put you on the realm of Judas and Antichrist. I don't think so. I don't think Satan has ever lifted his finger at me. He's got his little cronies do it. I've probably got a little bitty, insignificant demon taking care of me because I'm not much threat. Not like a Billy Graham or a Charles Stanley or all these great guys, Hyman Appleman's in the past, where, man, maybe they had that captain of Persia coming after him. So I want you to notice this is a spirit of war now that comes upon the earth. And notice here, this spirit will lead mankind to kill one another. Antichrist now is given a great sword. Well, think about this. He comes out, he gets some nations behind him. What does he do? He incorporates all that they have, like military hardware. He had a bow with no weapon in it there. Now, all of a sudden, he's been given a great sword. I believe this expands out to great military power and machinery. And notice what here. This great sword suggests great death. So notice here the Antichrist will have three that will greatly oppose him. And with that, I want us to turn to Daniel chapter 7. I told you we'd be getting into Daniel a little bit. We're going to tonight. And so there's three. Who are going to oppose him? The king to the north, the king to the south, and a confederacy from the east. So as we begin to look at Daniel chapter 7, let's look at it. Verse 1 and 2. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed, and he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon a great sea. So Daniel here has a vision about world history. If you remember in chapter number 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that nobody could interpret, and Daniel come along and interpreted. And it was like a statue, a figure, like of a soldier. And, the head of it represented one kingdom, and then it went on down through the other three. Basically, this is the same scenario using different symbology. So he has this dream, and this dream indicates that Daniel was asleep, it says dream. The vision speaks of the stages of what he saw, just like King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, 4 beasts here represents 4 kings and kingdoms. Notice in verse 3, and 4 great beasts came from the sea, diverse, different from one another. So in this, we're seeing here that this is not the 4 beasts of Revelation 4. I think it was Jennifer asked me that when we first got into this, and, oh, is this the same 4 beasts? I said, no, it's not. The 4 beasts of Revelation 4 are 4 living creatures. They're seraphims that are around the throne and always giving God honor and glory and all. These are 4 beasts, really are 4 kings that represents 4 kingdoms upon the earth. Actual kings, actual kingdoms. So I want you to notice as we get into this, the first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. A lion and eagle. So remember that. And I beheld till the wings there were plucked off. In other words, it couldn't fly anymore. And it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given unto it. So in this first beast, what do we see? This is the first king. A lion represents Babylon. This is going to be these 4 kingdoms. Okay? So these beasts represent the 4 kingdoms of Daniel chapter 2. Now here found in Revelation chapter 6. You know, that's kind of where we're going with these seals and this kingdom that is on the rise. And this is going to be one of these kingdoms, one of these 4. So here in this first king represents Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar. The lion speaks of strength and power. This is kind of wild how it comes out. Do you know what the 2 emblems were for Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom back then? It was a lion, and it was also, where it talks about here strength and all this, it talks about the eagle's wings. It was a lion and an eagle. That was their symbols. And here Daniel prophesied about these kingdoms and how it would all come about. And so there we go. And so I want you to notice now as we go down through here, and he says, and behold, it says that it was given a man's heart. That speaks of the change that happened to Nebuchadnezzar. You remember when he became almost like an animal and all that for, I think it was, if I remember right, 7 years. But God changed him, and he believed in him. And so it was given a man's heart. Okay, in verse 5. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear. So now we've had a lion with eagle's wings, and now a bear, and it was raised upon itself on one side. One side was higher than the other, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, of it between its teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, arise and devour much flesh. So I want you to notice here that as we get into the second beast here, the bear is the Medo-Persian Empire, the second empire. This is the empire that defeated Babylon. They would rise up. You say, who is that? Persia is Iran. The Medo-Persia, Medo was actually the weaker of the 2. That's why it says it was raised up on one side. One side was stronger than the other, and that was Persia. And so we see that they succeeded Babylon. The 3 ribs here, and this is very interesting because it kind of goes hand in hand with some of the stuff I've been teaching for decades now. Notice there were 3, and this kind of goes along, I think, with what is being said in Revelation, that there's 3 that's going to give, the Antichrist a difficult time. It's talking about 3 nations. Well, it's talking about those 3 ribs represent the 3 nations. And who are they? Babylon, whom they conquered, Lydia, whom they conquered, and Egypt. Okay, we know who Babylon is. We've read about them, Babylon. We know about Egypt. But who is Lydia? Lydia was over half of what we know as today as Turkey. Matter of fact, if you go back and study their capital, the capital was in Lydia. Many people used to call the nation Lydia. It was later on named Turkey. This goes right back to what I'm saying. But notice here, it says that Antichrist has come along here, and there's some nations in his rise to power that's giving him problem. This is the only area where I've seen that it makes me a little apprehensive to say that an Antichrist may rise up out of there, because Lydia's mentioned all the way back here, as one that would oppose them if you go back and study history. So, but I still believe Turkey's going to be the main player in the rise of Antichrist. Maybe not necessarily the Antichrist himself, but they're going to play a hand with Antichrist. So now we're seeing here that this bear rises up and it devoured. The Medo-Persian just devoured people. They just destroyed people when they took Babylon. They were a very ruthless people. You can read that. They reminded me much of Nazi Germany. They just didn't take prisoners. They just slaughtered everybody. And look at them today. Not much has changed about their character. I saw 2 nights ago, and I posted it, where you're here in the city and you're seeing the lights and you're hearing pow, 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 pow. That was the Iranian military shooting innocent protesters that were citizens of their country. Just mowing them down. Snipers, some with automatic weapons, and those young people, everybody just fleeing for their lives. And we'll get into that again in a moment. So, verse number 6. And after this I beheld, lo, another like a leopard, which had upon his back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given unto us. So now we're seeing this third beast. This is a leopard. This represents Greece. This represents Alexander the Great. And remember, he died as a young man. I think if I remember correctly, maybe I'm wrong, 29, I think it was, 28, 29, I think it's 29. But anyway, he died very young. But he conquered the ancient world. And notice it had 4 wings. What's that 4 wings about? Well, he just died abruptly. He had all kinds of infection in him and everything else, and his body just shut down. He just died. Well, they split the kingdom up 4 ways. So the Greek kingdom was split 4 ways to 4 generals. That represents the 4 wings. And so we're seeing all these things. And notice now we're going to go down to a 4th beast, verse 7. And I saw in the night visions and beheld a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible. Notice here, it doesn't name this 4th beast. It just says a 4th beast. It doesn't say, well, it's like this or like that. It just says it's dreadful and terrible, strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. That's kind of a hint. And it devoured, breaking to pieces, and stomped the residue with the feet. And if you remember going back to chapter number 2, had feet like of brass and stuff, talking about the Roman Empire. And so here, notice it says that he says, stomp the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. What's this talking about? Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was a vast empire, and until the Ottoman Empire come along, it was the oldest empire, lasted the longest. And I want you to notice here 10. There were 10 primary countries that it overthrew right off the bat. Now, if you go and if you pull up a list, and I have, you see the Roman Empire at the height of it. Man, they had just all kinds of nations that they just overthrew. Turkey was one of them. Everything around the Mediterranean Sea. They took half of the United Kingdom, Spain, France, Italy. I mean, everything around there. They just took it. And so this is a dreadful, terrible beast. It had 10 horns. That's what it's talking about. 10 primary nations there. And notice verse 8, I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. All of a sudden, here's these 10 horns, and he's giving us object lessons, as Jesus always did. He used parables, object. Well, here, the prophet Daniel's kind of he's trying to tell you, explain to you, kind of out of his dream, and using objects to do it. And he says, and there was a little horn that grew up amongst these 10 big horns. So it's a little horn. Before whom there was 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. So 3 of these initial countries that our nation is part of, remember that they were made up primarily of 10 primary nations made up the Roman Empire. Well, it's saying he's going to overthrow 3 of those. So now he's going to have the power of these 3 nations that he's overthrown, this little horn coming up. He's going to take control of those 3 plus what he already possesses. And so he says, before behind the first 3 horns were plucked up by the roots. I mean, literally just took them over everything. And behold, the horn were eyes like the eyes of man. So it's presenting this horn as someone that's kind of all-seeing. You ever wondered on the back of your U.S. $1 bill, why on one side we have a pyramid with 33 blocks on it and the top block is separated and has an eye in the middle of it? You ever seen? How many of you ever had a $1 bill? I know I'm broke. I'd show you one. Don't got one. Well, if you look on the back of it, it's kind of weird because over on the side, I think it's the right side, there's a pyramid there. Count the blocks, it's 30. I think it's 33. But the top cap block is separated from the others, from the main body. And it had an eye there. All my life I thought, well, it says on that dollar bill, in God we trust, that's all seeing eye of God. I was studying snakes one time. Why, I don't know. I think if I remember correctly, I was studying about the serpent in the Garden of Eden. I wanted to learn about snakes. Well, I learned something I didn't know. Snakes have two sets of eyelids. They don't ever close their eyes. This represents the eye of a serpent. Then I got to studying Egyptian mythology and found out, you remember what Egypt's symbol was? A cobra snake. Sitting up there. I've always thought the cobra snake after my studies was probably what was in the Garden of Eden because it's set up so much. They set up high. Most of them, as the curse, they crawl along. Of course, the cobra does too when he's crawling, but well, that thing rears up there, you know. I mean, it can get high if it's a big enough king cobra. And I learned something. In studying Egyptian mythology, they had what was called the all-seeing eye of Horus, Horus, Horus. That represented the all-seeing eye of that serpent, which represented in their mythology the all-seeing eye of Satan. He's ever watching. This horn has eyes all around it. It can see in every direction. We know that he's going to give us in Revelation chapter number 13 a mark of the beast. And for those who don't take the mark of the beast, they're going to get the guillotine. They're going to be killed. And so he's going to take full control. So here we see this horn coming up, and it said it had like the eyes of a man. So this is talking about a person. And a mouth speaking great things. So when we're looking at this, and we see this little horn, this is speaking about Antichrist coming up out of this 10-nation configuration, which was the original Roman Empire. And he's going to coexist with these 10 countries until he overthrows 3 of them. So there's going to be a coexistence here going on. He will speak, and what it's talking about when it talks about that he's going to speak, you know, these, when it says there, he says, and his mouth speaking great things. That means proud things. He's going to be obnoxious, he's going to be arrogant, and he's going to speak out very publicly about God. Are we not seeing that same thing? We're seeing things about our president now and other people that we've never heard before, calling each other everything under the sun. Used to, you would have never heard somebody in the United States. Remember when Dixie Chicks went over there, and I think it was George Bush, they criticized there on an English stage, and that decimated their career. Just decimated that career. So I want you to notice here that all of this is going on, and let's look on down through some of this now. And let's go to, where are we going to go to? Let's go to verse 23. Let's just skip over there. It's going to help us on some of these things. Verse 23. Well, let's go up a little bit. Let me see here. Where am I going to go? Verse 24. No, I'm sorry. Okay, verse 17. That's where I'm going to go. And he said, verse 16, and made me to know the interpretation of things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings. So he's not going to give you the interpretation like I've always kind of already have. Which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, shall receive the kingdom, possess the kingdom forever and ever, even ever and ever. So he gives us a little insight there that after all of this falls, the saints of God are going to rise up, usher in the kingdom of God, which will be during the millennial kingdom. And it's going to be a kingdom that will never know end. All these kingdoms would know an end. One overtook one, the next one overtook the next one, and right on down through. And then 4th kingdom, Antichrist, he's going to rule the world for a very short time, for about 3.5 years, or at least part of that time. Then it said, then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from the others, verse 19, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were like iron, and had nails like brass. And it's giving you hints here about the Roman. If you go back to chapter 2, it's giving you hints here about what Nebuchadnezzar saw. Which devoured, brake to pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And he says, and the 10 horns that were in his head, and one other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. He was stronger. He was more predominant. Verse 21, and I beheld the same horn made war with the saints. You need to underline that, because that's exactly what's going on right now. That's why you're seeing so much suffering in the body of Christ. I believe Satan on my heart has already started that part of the war on us and prevailed against them. There's a comma there, then a conjunction. It breaks the thought. He says, this is what's going to happen. Now let me tell you the end of it. He's going to prevail. So he's saying he's going to make war, but he says, let me go ahead and slip you to the end of the book. He's going to prevail against them. Verse 22. Until the Ancient of Days come. Who is that? That's God himself. The Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. He said, God's going to come on the scene, put an end to this. How's he going to do it? He's going to do it through Christ. And then the kingdom is going to be turned over to the saints of God, possess the kingdom. They will be the people of the kingdom. Thus he said, verse 23, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, shall be diverse from all the kingdoms, shall devour the whole earth. What is Antichrist going to conquer? The whole earth. That's what it says. And shall tread down and break it into pieces. He's going to tread it down, he says, and break it into all kinds of pieces. He's going to trample it. He's going to stomp it. And that's what it's talking about, that symbol there, of stomping everything. And then that's what it says, verse 24, the 10 horns out of the kingdom are 10 kings, and they shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against the Most High. I told you he's arrogant, he's boasting profound things. So what are these profound things that he's boasting? He's coming out and speaking against the Most High God. He's speaking blasphemy. And he shall wear out the saints of the Most High God. Wear out there, I think, is a better translation in my book, wear down. He's going to wear down the saints of the Most High God and think to change the times and the laws. What's he talking about, times and laws? Well, we've been seeing some of that, how that, in previous administrations, they come in and just start changing laws, and they're doing that right now across the states. They're just changing laws left and right. Oh, yeah. They're going against the Constitution. We've seen episodes. If you go back and study in a couple of, previous administrations, a guy went out and basically declared war on an African nation. He didn't have approval. He gave over $100 billion to Iran. He didn't get congressional approval. Nobody said a word. That's how they funded everything they've got now, was that, $100 billion worth of money. So many things went on there, but it was against the law. But notice here what Antichrist is going to do. He's going to come in and he's going to seek to change the times. Now, I wondered, why will he seek to change the times? Well, I think one of the things it's going to be, this is going to be against the Jews. What about if he changes the calendar and things like that? What will happen with the Passover? What will happen with the 7 feasts? Change the times. Well, what can that be talking about? Well, it could open up a whole diverse kind of situations here. But I want you to notice this, what he's doing. He's going to shake things up. It's going to go all his way. And so a time, and notice here, when he goes on down in this, and shall seek to change the times and the laws, and they shall be given into his hand. He's going to get to do it. And so in Daniel 7, notice that in verse 25, until a time and times and a dividing time. That's talking about 3.5 years. That's the last half of the tribulation period. Now, I want you to notice in verse number 26. We'll go on down through 27, I guess. And he says in verse 26, but the judgment, the court shall sit. So now all of a sudden we see God sitting at like court of law. Of course, Christ is going to be the judge. It says, and they shall take away his dominion and to consume and destroy it unto the end. That means forever in a Greek translation. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom of the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Now, so we kind of went through this, and we've looked at chapter 7 briefly. I know there's so much I could teach there. I dropped it in here to show you, because it kind of fit. There's going to be 3 that's going to oppose this Antichrist we're studying about. And so when we look at that, we just kind of labeled who those are. But like I said, one of them was Lydia, Turkey. Okay? Well, look at how Turkey has changed since, back during Babylon and all these days. And now we're going to see a confederacy out of the east. So we're thinking about that. Who were some of the nations that were in the original Roman Empire? Well, there was Jordan, which is to the east. There was Syria, which is to the east. There is Iraq, which is to the east. He said some to the north. What's to the north? Lebanon. What else is to the north? There's Syria. You got them all around them. What else is to the north? Turkey. So we're looking at all this. You're talking about Iraq. You're talking about Iran. Look at all those now Islamic nations that sit to the north. It sits to the east. It sits to the south. And he said there's going to be 3 that's going to be real ruthless counterparts to him. So Antichrist will have 4 great confederacies that he will put together. What is it? Well, the Roman Empire will be under his direct control. Those European nations not associated with the Roman Empire, Egypt, which includes the great Libya, which is in the northern part of Africa. So we're talking about Egypt and probably part of North Africa. The nations under the leaderships of the king of the east. So there's going to be 4 great conspiracies. So Antichrist is going to start out with those 4 great conspiracies, and then he's going to start taking the world with them. Where's most of your violence going on? In those 4 great conspiracies. That's where it's going on right now. So he's outlined to us in Revelation chapter number 6 what's just ahead of us. So is this the preliminaries of starting that? I think so. I've been saying it for a while. I think this is part of the preliminaries of setting up Antichrist. I told a good friend of mine that just the other day. I said, listen, they're doing some teaching on this. I said, I've been telling you, keep your eye on Turkey. And she's writing about Turkey. But there's things that you don't know. Okay, if this is the old Roman Empire resurrected, and we know that Constantine come in and he was the one that saw the vision in heaven, and he turned to Christ, supposedly accepted Christ. He made all of his troops confess Christ. Then he went on a worldwide rampage of overthrowing countries that weren't Christian. Okay, so then we had the Roman Catholic Church that came out of all that, right? And we had the Pope, right? Okay. But there's 2 branches of the Roman Empire. There's the East and there's the West. Now, the Western Empire, anybody know when it failed? 490 something AD. What about the Eastern one? 15 something? Ottoman Empire? Okay, if Antichrist comes out of the old Roman Empire, which involves a lot of nations now, that's a lot of nations he come out of. It just says he comes out of that, okay? But what was the capital of the Western one? The Roman Empire into the West, which would be over on the left side of Mediterranean, was Italy, in Rome, right? Roman Empire. Okay, what was the Roman Empire to the east? What was their capital? Constantinople. Okay, but during the Ottoman Empire, Constantinople was overthrown, what's it called today? Istanbul. You know where that's at? Turkey. So, if the last part of the Roman Empire that survived by 1,000 years, wouldn't it make sense if they go back and reinvent it, they would use the strongest branch of the Roman Empire to resurrect for Antichrist to use as a launching pad? And where was their capital? Turkey. So I'm telling you, keep your eyes on Turkey, folks. It just keeps fitting in the puzzle. Okay, let's go back to Revelation chapter number 6 now. Wanted to give you that little insight there. We needed that. So as we're back over in Revelation chapter number 6, let's go down to this third seal. That's kind of where we got. And when he had opened the third seal, he heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld a black horse. We've seen a white horse. We've seen a red horse. And now naturally, if you got white, you got to have black. So we're going to have a black horse. And a black horse and a little black horse. And he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. So when we're looking at this, here's now the third seal is open. And so we see the third beast announces this judgment. Because each of these are judgments, of course. The black horse is seen, a rider carrying a set of balances. Okay? The black horse refers to death. Remember, the red horse was war. The white horse coming in with a message of peace. Peace, sudden war. Now what always follows war? Death. A pair of balances in his hand. That's a careful rationing of food. Now, when we think about this, it's saying balance. So you're measuring something. What are they going to be measuring? Well, what normally happens when you have war? We saw it with Germany. We saw it with many nations that Germany overrun. They start taking all the food and they start starving to death. You're seeing it right now. I just studied something the other day. I've been studying about Iran. Do you know how much a dozen eggs pre-war? Remember when they were having riots before America attacked? Do you know how much a dozen eggs cost citizens back then? That's only been 5 weeks ago. What was the highest price our eggs got to? You ladies ought to know. Y'all tell me. What do y'all think? Was it $10, $11 a dozen, something like that? About $1 egg, wasn't it? Well, 5 weeks ago, a dozen eggs in Tehran would cost you 1 month's wages. I heard a report on that and studied that just a few days ago, and I was like, no wonder they were out in the middle streets. They're pouring all the money in the military. The higher echelon, the military and the higher echelon, are living like kings. They are. And the people that fund all that are starving to death. I'm thinking, every week, every one of us gets 168 hours. We normally in America apply 40 hours for work. So you're looking at 4 times 4, it's 160 hours. You have to work 160 hours for 12 eggs? What would a piece of meat cost you? I mean, that little thing that I heard there as I was studying just absolutely blew my mind. And we fussed about, I remember when it hit $5 a dozen. People were like, we can't afford eggs anymore. I'm thinking, for many of you, that's 1/10 of an hour's worth of a wage. How would you like to give a whole month's worth of work? How else do you live? How do you pay your rent? How do you pay your fuel? How do you pay your heat? How do you pay your water? How do you get your kids to school? What do you do feeding them? If eggs cost that much, what does their school lunch cost? If any of them even go to school now. So we look at this, we're already starting to see signs of this, folks. People are starving worldwide right now. Africa has been in a drought so long. And the crazy thing is, here's the ones trying to help them. They have the best irrigation system known in the world. They have very little water source. Their main water source is River Jordan. And that bench right there is as wide as it is in some places. And they feed the whole nation of Israel off that one stream. It's insane. but they reproduce that water and refilter it and refilter it and refilter it. I mean, they got the best, hydration system no world. They've been sharing all that technology, sharing it with Africa, just to help them out. And so when we're looking at all this rationing of food here, remember too, as a negative side of the number, is division. So when you think about this, those, that have not, they're going to even have less. But we're going to see something else just a minute. Those that have plenty are going to have plenty more. So it's still going to be a division of who has and who doesn't. Right now, that's going on in Iran. There are those that have, and there's plenty more than those that don't. But those that don't are never going to have, because that's the system now it's established. So as we're looking at this black horse, it refers to death. So the rationing of food, that's what the balances are. But I want you to notice the Bible talks about a measure of wheat for a penny. A penny in the Bible is a month's wages. It can be a day's wage, but when it was talking about times of famine, then a penny becomes a month's wages. And so 3 measures of barley for a penny. What follows war? Famine. Now think about this. It didn't say 3 measures of wheat. Do you remember when the young lad come and he had, how many fishes was it? Jesus took the fish and broke it, and he had some little loaves. Do you remember what kind of loaves he had? They were barley loaves. They weren't wheat loaves. That meant this was one poor kid. Because you know what barley was used for? Animal feed. Can you ladies, and anybody else here, and anybody that's watching, can you imagine taking and baking animal feed to feed your kids? But when that little tyke walked up there and they said, all we got is these fishes here and these little loaves of bread, little biscuits, and they were made out of barley loaves. That meant it was the poorest of the poor. But what did God multiply? He didn't multiply that which was rich. He broke and multiplied that which was poor. Where's all the real work going on in the church? Well, the Southern Baptists, after about 40-some years, finally got, their head together and said, we just know something. In the 1940s, they were saying, everybody needs to take these little churches, sell them, make a big church. We need to make a church. We'll reach more people. We'll have more people, more ministries, more money coming into one place, and we can do all this. So we did. Started making mega churches. Shutting church down left, right, making mega churches. Methodists followed, tried to do the same thing. Every one of them failed. Why? Because they found out the small churches, 40 years later, you know who was winning all souls? It wasn't the mega churches. It was the small churches. Who was giving all the money for missions? It wasn't the mega churches. It was the small churches. Who was doing all the mission work? It wasn't the big churches. It was the little churches. Almost every category they had come out, the small churches were doing all the work. And yet here God is showing us that in the end times, it is going to be the poorest of the poor is going to suffer the most. They're going to suffer literally the most here, folks. So when this third seal, this horse comes out, and he says in here, verse 6, and I heard the voice in the midst of the floor, a measure of wheat for a penny. I just read that to you. And see that thou hurt not the oil and the wine. What is that? Don't hurt the oil and wine. That's talking about the rich. You that have nothing, don't hurt the oil and wine, because the rich need to feast on that. The people, when in the time of famine, they don't have oil and wine. Those are luxuries. They make a cake maybe out on a hot rock or an open flame. They don't have oil. They just make it any way they can. But it says, see that you hurt not the oil and the wine. That's talking about the rich. He's saying there's going to be a dividing coming. What does death do? What does war do? It divides. Who normally lasts the longest? The one that has the most. The rich, the powerful, those that are in control, all these things. But he's saying this is going to be going on during tribulation. He said more of it, and it gets worse. He says there's going to be greater famine we've ever done. Okay? So we're looking at all these things. And so here's where it is. Matthew chapter 20, verse 5 and 7. We're going to finish here in just a moment. For many shall come to me in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And so he said, even in those days there were Antichrist when Jesus walked the earth. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. This is looking forward, by the way. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. I read that not long ago. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. This is the spirit of famine. We saw this spirit that came out, and we see this death horse, the black horse. What is that horse? It represents the spirit of famine. Lamentations chapter number 5, verse 10. Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. Lamentations was talking about this. And the prophet here wrote, what does it mean the skin turn black? You see, when someone goes a long time without nutrition or is dehydrated, chronic dehydration, their skin becomes turned black. I mean, actual black. And so this is probably what's going to come on this time, as these folks are going to become changing in color. This word naris means here, this, when we talk about wages, normally that's a day's wage. But when there's great famine, that can be up to a month's worth of wages. We saw a time when Jesus used a parable, and he said that, the rich owner went out and he hired some early in the day, and he said, I'll give you a penny. And they said, when later on the phone about an hour before him, he gave them a penny too. Well, the first ones that worked all day said, hey, you give them the same thing. And he said, isn't that what you agreed to? It's my money, why can't I do what I want to? Normally, a penny represents a day, but think about an extreme famine. Like right now, think about how many families are impacted with $4 gas. And probably I'd say right now, out in California, it's probably $10 a gallon. Think of all the trucking firms that have contracts with groups. I remember years ago when we went through that, and a lady was on radio and she called in. She said, people don't understand. She said, my husband owns a small trucking company here in California. And she said, when we signed these contracts, she said, gas was like $1.70 something, and said, and then I think it was Biden when he said all of a sudden it jumped to like $3 or $4, or maybe it was Obama jumped. It went up like $4 up. He said gas is too cheap, so it went about $4 up. She said out here it's almost $7, and she said he's bound to a contract for 365 days, and she said we're eating the loss every day. So what they would normally buy 4 gallons of gas for, they were getting 1. And I can tell you from working logistics at Eastman, those contracts can be great, but they can cut your throat if you're not savvy. So we look at all these things. This oil wine represents the very, rich of the rich. So the third seal will not affect them. This is the first time we've seen a seal not affect a certain group, because they're going to be able to afford anything they wish. We're going to stop right there. I'm going to get my trusty pen out, and I'm going to say number 22, because that's what it'll be. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We will be back in this study and pick up this 4th seal next week, give you a little bit of history there on Daniel. So I appreciate you coming into our study. Thank you. All right, folks, let me get down there and turn this off.